Hello Steemits, Crypto G here, coming at you with a video tutorial on shallow depth of field, or as the Japanese call it, the bokeh. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but it's a kind of aesthetic appreciation of the way that some lenses and some certain types of photography tend to blur in the sort of edges in the distance. I'm just going to show you a way of just recreating shallow depth of field photography and just kind of tell you why you might want to do that and the kind of difference between high depth and low depth of field photography. It can often confuse newcomers, high depth and low depth, because actually what high depth means is that there is a very high depth to the photograph that is in focus. So here we have a boy standing in front of a wall, and we can still, even though it's clearly not sharp, like mega sharp, we can still see lines, they're not blurred. And if we zoom in, the boy starts to almost look as if he's flattened against the wall. And if we look at if we go to the right and look at the lamppost or the sign here, again, that starts to look as if maybe it's even part of the drawing. And it takes us a while, maybe by looking at the windows, that actually the whole wall is sloping away from us and isn't in fact flat. And so we use so a high depth of field flattens the image, whereas a shallow depth of field, whereby perhaps only the boy is in focus, or even you could go even shallower and maybe even only the camera he's holding is in focus, and we get a sort of gradient of going less and less focus as we go back to the wall and back along this wall. So I'm going to show you how to recreate that on an image such as this. You'd probably usually use a longer image. I'm going to just quickly show you an image that for me is almost perfect but doesn't quite do it because there's no central focal point, which is this image such as this. If there was something here, somebody standing here, a car, something as a central focal point in the foreground, we could really create this, and the way the lights will go all, that kind of nice pixelated effect when everything blurs. So I'm just going to shut that down and we're going to work on this. So the first thing you want to do is to focus you're going to create some imaginary focus points. So we're going to say that here, this window here, I'll just zoom in slightly, and we go to the marquee tool, and I try and draw a square around the window here. We can see that actually I can't get a proper square around it. No matter how much I move or manipulate, I can't get this inner square, and that obviously denotes that it's tilting away from the camera. I'm just going to Control D. And deselect that. Okay, let's zoom out a bit. So we know that the wall's sloping away. So I'll just use this just so that you can see where I'm talking about. I'm going to take a point from, say, there, which I'm going to say is the furthest thing that's away from the camera, and I'm going to say it's equivalent to about here. Yeah, I'm going to say it's equivalent to about here. Now, the reason I'm saying that is because, of course, there's a window above here, and that too is sloping away, but it's further along the wall. So this point here must be further back than this point here. So I'm going to say this point here, if you drew a line, you'd come to roughly, I don't know, roughly about there. I'm going to say, so I'm going to say this and this are the same. And I'm going to say this point here and some points off the screen is about the same. So this whole section will be one layer, and the section from here, sorry, not the section, but here and here will be the same. Now that'll all make sense in a bit, so please bear with me. Okay, so I'm just going to deselect everything there, Control D. So the first thing we want to do is create a layer, duplicate our original layer. So I've called the bottom layer original, and I've called this window wall F14. Now that will make sense. I'm going to apply a filter. I'm going to call it box. I'm going to apply a box blur filter, and you guessed it, I'm going to put the value of 14 in there. And this is something I've arbitrarily chosen. I'm going to say OK. Okay, so hopefully this will start to make sense. I'm going to apply a layer mask, and I'm going to go to my brush. My brushes, I've got quite a big brush here, 241 diffused brush. Let's just quickly show you that. Obviously I went 200 and I've expanded it. And as I said, in fact I'm going to go a bit smaller. As I've said, this part of the window here, the furthest back, say around here, I'm saying is equivalent to, let's get my brush, 200, here we go, is equivalent to, what did I say, around here on the wall. So this little thin strip here. I'm just going to go around the lamppost. Oops. And yeah, go all the way up to the top. Okay. I don't have to be super accurate, but there we go. That's our first point. Okay, so all I've done there is create a layer mask, and I've drawn some of the blur we've just created. And to remind myself of the value, I've called this layer F14. Now I'm going to go down to the second layer, and I'll come over to this because you guys can't see my right-click menu. And oops, layer, and I'm just going to duplicate layer, and immediately I'm going to call this wall window, so it's easier to read. Wall window right, and I'll call that I don't know, let's call it F16. We'll use about a 16 blur. Okay, so make sure that stayed underneath. Add filter, box blur, and I'll just type in the value there. I'll select it, type in the value 16. It's a bit laggy because I'm recording the screen. Very laggy, in fact. There we go, 16. I'll OK that, and I'm going to add a layer mask. Oops, I missed the button. There we go, layer mask, fat fingers. I'm still on my brush tool, and so yeah, I'm saying that this point here in the window is going to be roughly the same as all of this. Yeah. Oops, I've gone a bit too far down there. Just going to undo that. Say it's roughly the same as all of this. Okay, so I'm going to get you back in a second once I have done that. Okay, hi Steamians. I just wanted to bring you back at this point. As we can see here, I have basically blurred out this wall and given it an effect where it's coming from left to right. It's getting it's getting more and more blurred because of the fact that it's sloping away from the camera. So there's a fair distance between this and this. Now, the right and the left side. Now, I didn't do it perfectly because I wanted to make a couple of points. I wanted to illustrate a couple of points for you and go through, because as you can see here, we've got a hell of a lot of layers, and I wanted to go through. So I'm going to turn off all of these layers, and then I'm going to just turn them on. Oops, I'm I'm just going to turn them on individually so that you can see what's going on. Now, okay, here we go, and let's turn off our original. So here we go. So we've called this wall left 1 F7, and so yeah, we're labeling this way here, and as you can see, this is the bottom layer. It's the closest layer to the original. The original is untouched. So I'll just turn this off, and you'll see there I've just created a small mask, and I've put F7 is the amount of box blur I've used, and that's what I've painted in. Now if we go to wall left 2 F8, we can see there. Now this is something that I wanted to make a point of, is that you can start to see mistakes you've made, and well, not mistakes, just basically where you've left out. These are kind of useful to leave these gaps because you can end up blending the two parts together more convincingly and using a bit more care, and maybe using some eraser here and there and saying, okay, I don't, oops, that's a bit too big, saying, okay, I don't want so much of it in a certain place, and so you might sort of come back and erase wherever. Actually, we're on the wrong layer to do that. So now I'll just keep clicking them in, and as you can see, that's F9. I've called wall left F9, wall middle F10. See the gaps there. I did this all on the original layer, so you could sort of do it by clicking on and off the original layer to keep reminding yourself where you're going as you go on. Here we go, wall F15. There we go, and then the furthest point here. And so you remember we created these 2 points around the window, and we sort of drew imaginary lines and imagined where the depth of this wall would be equivalent to the furthest recessed depth of the window, and we did the same. And those created our starting points. Now the difference F14 to F7, that's obviously 50%. And considering this slope of wall, I would say that's too much. And really, the starting point should probably be a couple of stops lower than that. So say F12 to F7, or maybe F11 to F7. So that's something I might play about with after the tutorial. But for now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to flatten the image. I'm going to save the image first. Now this is why you need a free account. Please open up a Pixlr account. It's totally free, hassle-free as well. And you can do things like this. You can save to, I can save to the Pixlr cloud, and I can save it as a, sorry, here we go, the JPEG option. Save it as a layered Pixlr image, which means obviously I'm not going to do that now because that can take a long time. In fact, I shouldn't have even gone on to that because it's now working. So I'll probably leave you now. But I just wanted to say you want to save that, then flatten down the entire image, duplicate the image again, and then we're going to go on to that. I just want to show you that actually. So I'm going to just pause the video whilst this is working, and I'll come back and do that with you. Okay, Steamian, so yeah, I've done that, and as I said, I'll work on this after the tutorial, and so the thumbnail will look a lot better than this. But as I say, I think the difference between this blur and this is a bit unrealistic considering the gentle slope. So I'm going to now flatten the image. So we can come up to layer if we like, and we can just simply go to flatten image. So that's now a flattened image. I will then duplicate the layer again, and this first layer is going to be called pavement 1. pavement 1, and we will give it a, and we'll say F7. Yeah, F7. We're going to, again, like we did before, filter box blur. We're going to type in F7 there after selecting. It's going to change any second now. There we go. We're going to hit OK. And we see we've got a blur now of 7 over everything, which we then apply a mask to. Come back to our brush. And now this time we're just going to, I'm just going to zoom in actually. Let's get to where we want. There we go at the edge there, and that brush is too big now. Let's go down to say 70. Yeah, that's perfect. So we're now just going to draw in this back half of the pavement and the ledge. We're not going to get too anal about matching up focal points, but we're going to say that, you know, this half of the pavement is, you know, it's significant enough, it's far enough away from the back of the front of the curb here for us to give it a different focal point. So we're just going to go like that. I'm going to zoom out and just turn off the layer, and so we'll see what I've drawn back in. There we go. And, you know, so I'll just sort of play around with that. And then obviously I'm going to, let me just turn that back on. I'm going to do this for the entire picture. I'm going to do this for the entire picture. Everything will have different focal points. As I come up to behind the child here, the focal point will literally be kind of what it is. It'll, you know, the blur will be maybe 1 or so, because I want to keep the original focus of the boy. And then perhaps around here at the front, I'll add a Gaussian blur, which is more of an out of focus blur rather than a depth of field blur. And they are slightly different. But I'm going to go off and do that. That's going to take quite a long time. This isn't, you know, it's an advanced effect. It's going to give a really nice effect. And, you know, the best things in life do take more effort, don't they? So I'm going to whiz off. By the time I've done this, I will sort of edit the video and get it all out, and it'll be looking really nice. But yeah, I'll probably I'll come back right at the end just so that you can see the various files there, and I can quickly explain that. But okay, so it's going to be a few hours for me, but luckily for you, the magic of digital time travel, you'll be back in a sec. Okay, hello Steamians. I'm back now, and here's the finished image. I'm fairly happy with that, to be honest. I don't know if you can see there, there's probably a bit of detail around the head where I sort of messed up and I ended up duplicating an error. And so I think before this video goes live, I'll go back into the files, sort that out. Hopefully it's not right at the beginning I duplicated it. And then I can recreate this and yeah, get it a bit better. But as you can see, if I just show you the difference there, so that's what we looked like at first, and that's what we are now. So you can see we've added a bit of depth. You can see the way he flattens up against the image in the original, and then kind of pings out a bit in the background. And you know, if you have a look at the back wall there as well, we've got a nice graded blur going from left to right, as even one side of her face, you know, as it should be, because she's on a slope on this wall, and it's the same here. So I basically, you saw what I did with the wall, did the same thing with the pavement across, and then the road up to, you know, right up to our subject, and then the front of the road, all of it had a Gaussian blur of 39, I believe I gave the front blur. So there you go. That's the effect. Hope you like it. You can use it and make it as complicated or as simple as you want, and you can use it to add depth of field to where there wouldn't be. Of course, with a photograph like this, in reality, a camera wouldn't take a shallow depth of field and everything be like this. This would be very different, the foreground. So what we would probably do, to be honest, we probably wouldn't even do the foreground. We'd just crop in a bit like this and create it. But like I said, I'm going to clean up the head area so it looks a bit more natural, looks a bit better, like as the left side does and by his body. And yeah, and that's basically us done. So hope you enjoyed this one, Steamians and YouTubers. A bit more of a complex tutorial. Any questions, please post them. And as ever, let me know below what you think and what you'd like to see in the future. Okay, thanks and bye-bye.